Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our September webinar. Today, I'm excited to talk about, actually, it's one of my favorite events to work on. I don't always love events, but this event is a lot of fun. Our Innovation Awards. It's the 6th year we've been doing this, so we're calling LA's Best Buildings. Tell us what you're up to and get in the mix this year. Today, I'll be talking about, first things first, wanted to thank our primary sponsor, the LA Department of Water and Power, as always, for their support of all of our content and programming. A few housekeeping items before I get into it. We will be circulating the slides and recording by Friday, as per usual. We'll keep the lines muted to keep things orderly, but please do submit any questions via the chat box. I hope we'll answer a lot of them today. That's really the intent of the webinar today. But if you do have any specific questions, do bring them up. We'll have plenty of time at the end, and then we appreciate your feedback. So if you'd like to tell us how we did, great, not so great, super bad, let us know over email at the end. I'm Dave. I run the LA Better Buildings Challenge, Executive Director here. I'll be doing all the talking today, just talking through this process and answering any questions that anyone has about it. So with that, getting into the meat of today's webinar, which I think will be shorter than an hour, so plenty of time for questions. Our objectives, my objectives for today, is that everybody be clear on what the criteria are and the different categories. You're doing a lot of work, and sometimes more in one category or the other. I'll talk about that, but it's all relevant. We'll talk about how to submit a project. It's very quick, very easy. There is no fee, but we'll go through that process and then process with finalists, shortlisting, and so forth, leading up to the awards itself. I'll talk about project eligibility. We often get questions about this. So getting really clear on the point that we're looking at everything, looking at improvement over time, and then specifically what's happened this year. So how does what happened this year, 2019, build on the work you've been doing since the beginning? And then, of course, the submission deadline, end of this year, so December 31st. It will come up quick, so encourage you to get that application going sooner than later. And ultimately, hope you all come away ready to submit, excited, and clear on how to do that. So with that, I'll jump in. What are the Innovation Awards? Innovation Awards are unique, and I'll go into why that's the case, but focusing on innovation and leadership around energy and water performance. Not just efficiency, but performance, because there's so much more to it. And I think that word tries to capture the human side that goes into this as well. So it's not just innovation in terms of technology, but innovation in terms of project development, execution, commitment, forward-thinking leadership, more broadly. And what makes this unique is the base of judges and collaborating organizations that are involved. You'll notice a diversity here, looking at commercial real estate, as well as advocacy, academia, as well as policy, the utility perspective, the technical perspective. So all of these judges and all of these collaborating organizations bring a different perspective to what does it mean for a project to be innovative, what's significant and why. And that's why it's fun for me as I see the scoring come in, because everybody has a different perspective. We'll get into the criteria, how the scoring actually works. And I also think, and I have heard from the judges, that the exchange that happens on the calls where we discuss the different projects and the scoring is valuable. For the utilities to hear from commercial real estate, vice versa, for advocacy and policy folks to hear from both those groups. That exchange is really fun, and I think an important part of moving the entire industry, the entire conversation forward, is that we understand each other and where we're coming from. Some pictures from last year, but it's a fun day. We'll be at the California Endowment as always, and there's tacos. I wanted to make sure to include a picture of the food. We'll have live music, but it's a nice afternoon. a nice long lunch, and we moved through a lot of content. So we do have 5 categories, and I'll go into some more detail on these and some examples of past winners and some key attributes of their applications that really stood out. Our most prestigious award, Portfolio of the Year. A clarifying point on this one, this is multiple sites. It doesn't necessarily have to be the entire portfolio, but multiple sites, multiple buildings, energy and water. Energy Efficiency Project of the Year, self-explanatory. Water Efficiency Project of the Year. Walk the Walk is our category for public buildings. So that's our city, state, federal buildings, and highlighting the work that they're doing. And then our individual award is for Innovator of the Year. And it's also a very exciting category. So our general criteria are the same, basically across all of the categories, except for Innovator of the Year, of course. Looking at both unit and percentage energy or water savings, or both, since taking ownership, and then specifically in the past year, or in this case, the current year, in 2019. We look at Energy Star Portfolio Manager primarily to assess that, but we also will consider utility rebate applications or data from other systems that you may have in case your building doesn't fit neatly within the Portfolio Manager framework, as we know not all do. And then qualitative factors, which when we look at the scoring end up being even more important in a lot of cases. And that's because we want to recognize the fact that squeezing out additional savings year over year gets harder and harder. It's not a linear curve, it's exponential in terms of the difficulty of execution. And so we want to account for those qualitative factors in the scoring. Alignment with an organization-wide commitment that is public. If we see that top-down leadership within a company, we think that's really important generally, and the judges will be looking at that. Market context, what we mean by that is how is this building or how is this portfolio performing relative to others within its peer group? We do have a lot of diversity within the applications. We have a small number of categories and a large number of buildings that apply or that exist in LA. And so we're often comparing multifamily residential versus hotel versus office versus industrial. And so, of course, those are all different market segments with different drivers having to do with a range of factors, which you all know. And so that context is important. And again, a point where some of the judges may differ on how important that is. Stakeholder engagement means internal stakeholders, so staff, tenants, hotel guests, students, what have you, up and down and sideways throughout an organization, and external stakeholders as well. So that's also important, communicating what you've done, what you're doing, why, how people can participate. I think even more important today as we see awareness really in the public discourse around climate and related issues and the role that buildings can play in the solutions. And then, of course, innovation. This is the Innovation Awards. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not just talking about technology, but about execution, staging. Working in existing buildings is very difficult, as you know. And some of the most exciting projects we've seen have been working in tight spaces, working in operating concerns that cannot go down during construction. And so really want to highlight and recognize that aspect of what it takes to do this work. Also, on the more organizational side, we'll say innovation around procurement. That was a big factor with one of our past winners last year. Innovation in terms of allocating budget, how you're looking at return on investment and allocating capital accordingly. So it's a broad definition of innovation, and we think that's really important because it's not just about technology, it's about people and how these projects are developed and executed. So those criteria show up in a scoring matrix. These are distributed to the judges. The criteria are listed across the top in columns. Then the shortlisted projects, these were the energy efficiency finalists from 2 years ago that are shown here, are listed in vertically. The judges assign a weighting factor. How important are each of these criteria relative to one another? Then they score each project on a scale of 1 to 10 relative to one another, and the tool will calculate a score. So it's a good tool we found to help sift through a lot of complicated information. Decision making generally is difficult, and the judges are looking at so many great projects that this has been helpful in coming up with really an objective answer of which project did the judges collectively feel deserved the award. Energy efficiency project of the year, somewhat self-explanatory, but again, looking not just at the percentage savings or the unit savings, but these qualitative factors that are so important. I think last year's winner is a great example, and I don't want people to get confused with the years. 2019 meant the awards that were held this year, so this was based off of projects completed in 18 and prior to that. What I think really stood out to the judges about this project was not just the numbers, though those were very impressive, but the execution. I think this is a great example of that, and the context. So a little bit about that. NBC Universal was purchased by Comcast. As part of that acquisition, there was a strategic imperative to consolidate business units that were scattered throughout different sites throughout the city, bring everybody into the headquarters building at 10 UCP. They cycled out existing tenants, made deep tenant improvements to set things up to bring those staff in-house. So there was massive churn happening, installation of lots of new equipment, while at the same time, investments in the backbone systems of the building to accommodate all of that and net out some tremendous efficiency gains. So, a very fluid environment, high degree of difficulty in execution, and they also did a really great job of telling the story. I want to point that out as well. Really telling the story, giving us the full picture, because all of the criteria are important. The judges can only score or assign credit if we're aware of everything that happened. And so it's not an extensive exercise in documentation, but do want to make sure that we get the bullet points out there about what was the context that the project happened within. So I think this is a great example of that. So the quantitative factors, impressive savings, but really scored highly on qualitative factors around innovation in execution, consistency with corporate strategy, and context, doing all of this while simultaneously consolidating all these business units. Great project. Water efficiency project of the year. I won't repeat all of the same points. Same criteria, but having to do with water. Weston Bonaventure was last year's winner. Really impressive project, innovative in terms of really the whole gamut. Impressive numbers in terms of units, and a good improvement in terms of savings too. It is a huge operation. They run about 90% occupied. A lot of you probably attend seminars and conventions there. It's always busy. And they continued to squeeze in expansions to their existing water recycling system and tie that in with the construction of a hot water plant that would get them off of the district hot water plant that had failed them and created the driver for this project. So very innovative in terms of the execution. I think the other point that really came into play here was the continued improvement. They already had achieved significant water savings. They already had an existing water recycling system, but they added more to it. And credit to the chief engineer there, Pat Surge, really conceived of this concept of, hey, I think we can do more by tying in our new hot water plant to this system as well. So another one that really checks all of the boxes and did a great job of telling the story and making sure that the technical details were clear. And credit also to their consultant, Maximum Energy Professionals, who did a lot of that documentation of the technical details, as well as Aqua Recycle. So another great example. I will say that there were other entrants in this category that had larger savings, even 10x number of savings, but the judges felt that the other qualitative factors were so impressive with this project that it won. So I don't want people to think that, well, my project is smaller than these ones that are being highlighted here. That does not mean you can't win. We had a cold storage facility, a family-owned cold storage facility, take home energy efficiency project of the year 3 years ago. Not a huge project, but was able to achieve a lot, tremendous stakeholder engagement, and shed 40%. So I guess the point I want to underline there is that it's not just the biggest projects that win, and this is an example of that. Portfolio of the year, as I mentioned, this is multiple sites representing, the larger the proportion of the portfolio, the better. Looking at reductions across multiple sites. The reason that I think this is the most prestigious award is because doing one project on top of an existing workload in an existing operating building is hard. Doing multiple projects at multiple buildings at the same time is super hard. And so it takes an even higher, I think, degree of commitment and organization to pull this off. Brookfield has won 2 years in a row. Very impressive. I think they're still the largest landlord in downtown, last I checked. And buildings all very efficient. They had some new acquisitions that I think brought the average Energy Star score down, but they've been making investments to get those up. So I expect this has climbed significantly since then. But that said, impressive reductions year over year. 87 is very high as an average score, and continue to push that up. So they do a great job. They did a great job of telling the story of what they did, of documenting the specific projects in each building. And what stood out to me, and I think the judges, was the way that they coordinate and share information internally. They have monthly meetings where all of the chief engineers get together with ownership, with local asset management, to discuss what's working, what's not, what are the opportunities they see, what can they learn from one another, and the culture that Brian Pajak has created there. I think a quote from him was, there is no failure, there's only learning. And you just see that year after year, they continue to find new opportunities. So I think a great example of the collaboration, the execution, good job telling the story, and solid numbers year over year. And again, with a score as high as an average of 87, squeezing out 3% EUI reduction year over year is very, very impressive, and 4% water similarly so. Again, we've had portfolios with more buildings, properties with fewer buildings. So same story as here. It doesn't have to be the biggest portfolio or the biggest landlord. It's all of these factors taken together that determines the winner. Walk the walk. We have the public buildings separate from the private buildings. We had 3 winners last year, same categories. So I won't, for time's sake, go into as much detail here. Portfolio of the year, LA Unified School District, of course, the second largest school district in the country. Impressive projects across the board. I think that the judges were also impressed with the way that they engage students. Just this past week, with the climate strikes, we saw students out in force, very active around these issues, young people engaged, and I thought that was really inspiring, and I think the judges did too. And they were ahead of that. They were already engaging students around this, involving them in projects, sharing with them what was happening in their schools, and I think that was a big part of why they scored so well. In water, last year's winner was LA County, and huge numbers, but when it comes to innovation, this is the one I was alluding to, where it was really innovation in procurement. It was the way they went about putting together the projects. They worked backwards from an outcome, from a desired result, and put it out to the market to come to them with solutions, to come to them with cost-effective solutions that would achieve their desired outcome. And through that, they saw a diversity of approaches, went with the one that they found to be most compelling, most cost-effective, and tremendous savings. I think the numbers were on the order of 40 million gallons a year, and they're looking to expand that. So really tremendous figures, big portfolio, but the real innovation, I think, was in procurement, less so in the technology per se. And in the energy category, LA Convention Center, they've been making improvements year over year over year, and last year was the culmination of a lot of that work. Very impressive in terms of comprehensiveness, and then significance, context. The convention center is really one of the ways that so many people experience LA. They come here for conventions, for meetings, close to LA Live and the city center. So really important in terms of the communication as well. So these are all very large projects, but again, that's a coincidence in this case. Smaller projects have won in the past, and we're already seeing some great entries in all three categories that I think are going to be very, very competitive. So looking forward to seeing the rest of what comes in this year. Innovator of the Year is our award that recognizes an individual who's made a really outsized contribution to the industry to move the conversation forward. Last year, our winner was David Jaco. He is the Director of Efficiency Solutions at LADWP, and behind the scenes, he has made huge improvements to streamline rebate processes, to get ahead on distributed energy resources, electrification, tremendous lift, big organization, and felt it was really noteworthy and nominated by and judged by a panel of peers. So if you know somebody who has really made an outstanding contribution, they deserve some recognition, send it in, nominate them, and we would look at their LinkedIn profile primarily, and then follow up with some additional questions. So with that, those are the categories, those are the criteria. I hope those examples are helpful in terms of how the judges look at things. In terms of details, the nomination period is open, so it's a quick and easy process. It's open through December 31st. Looking at existing buildings, so not new construction. Want to make sure that's clear. This is renovations, retrofits, upgrades to existing buildings. Got to be within LADWP territory, so City of LA. And then we're looking for at least some projects or initiatives completed in 2019. And so that does not necessarily have to be capital, major capital projects. This could include tenant engagement campaigns, retro-commissioning, operational improvements that result in savings. So it doesn't have to be a major capital project that completes in the current year. It could be operational in nature. And again, building on a track record is really key. It's one of the biggest factors, actually. At this point, anyone can submit a project, anyone can nominate a project. So if you are a contractor or a chief engineer or a consultant or an owner, of course, put the projects in the mix. The owner will have to accept the nomination. They have to want the award, and we have to get all of the information. But if you feel that one of your clients really deserves, or one of your customers really deserves recognition for work that you're aware of or that you were involved in, get them in the mix, and we can follow up and formalize things after the fact. And we try to be very respectful of everybody's time. We know everybody's very busy, so only projects that are considered for the shortlist will be asked to provide more narrative and more documentation. So I'll talk more about what's involved in the initial submittal now. This is a screenshot of the form. It's very short. We ask that you simply select a category that you'd like to submit for. If you're unsure about which category makes the most sense for you, we're happy to talk through it, or you can choose one and we can talk through it afterwards. Sometimes more than one can make sense. So select a category. It's a very brief questionnaire, just 2 lines about what you've done. We do ask that you share access, read-only access to your Energy Star Portfolio Manager account. Hopefully everyone is using that because it's required for the EBW ordinance. As I said, that's how we our first source to look at the data. I know it's not perfect, but it gives us a good first cut. And if a project is selected for the shortlist, we'll be happy to look at additional data sources. So if you feel that there's a compelling reason we should look at it earlier, do let us know. Then we ask for brief description, very brief, which this means 2 or 3 sentences. What did you do? And who do we talk to? So points of contact. For ownership, we'll also want to know who handles marketing communications, just to facilitate follow-up on pictures and approval of language and so forth that would go into case studies and other work that we'll do to promote the finalists. So it's a very quick process. Should take no more than 3 to 5 minutes to submit a project. And again, anyone can submit a project. So if you feel your customer or client deserves recognition, you could also submit them on their behalf. For the finalists, we do ask for more information, and less is more, but we do want to hear, the whole story. So we don't put a hard limit on the length, but we don't penalize brevity. Absolutely not. Some of the winners that you saw highlighted earlier were pretty brief in terms of describing what they did, and the projects, really stood on their own merits. But if you have a running log of projects that you've done, we can work with documentation from whatever system you currently use to track it. So we're not trying to create work here, trying to leverage and highlight the work you've already done. But answers to these questions will help us understand how the projects align with your organization's goals, what are those goals, and how the project was innovative. And we'll follow up and actually discuss all of this too, to make sure that we're capturing everything that's important for the judges to know before they make their selections. Again, this is only requested from the finalists, not at the initial submittal stage, which is where we are now. So all of this happens after January 1st. Between now and the end of this year, it's just a couple quick lines about the project, who is the point of contact, and sharing access to Energy Star so we can get a high-level picture of what's happening. So this is not something that everybody is needing to do necessarily. We're not the only awards program out there, so we want to make sure that we're not creating extra work for anybody. So if you're going for USGBC Award or the Toby Awards, we've crosswalked all of the criteria, and you can reuse everything that you've done for the relevant sections of what you would submit for those awards for our purposes. So we've had some owners, some winners and finalists do that in the past. So it's an opportunity for additional recognition, different recognition. And again, our award is specific to energy and water performance, where USGBC and Toby are broader or different in terms of the criteria that they look at or the categories that they have. We summarized those quickly here. Of course, if you're going for those, you're familiar, but USGBC, a lot more categories. There's a fee to submit also, and that deadline is coming up pretty soon. So if you're going for energy and atmosphere, or if you're going for water, all the work that you do for that and any of the documentation for other stuff would be relevant for ours too, and our deadline's not till December 31st. So you can easily go for both, and no fee with LABBC Awards. The Tobies have a lot of different categories too, for various reasons, and you see some of the criteria there. But the takeaway here is any documentation, they also look at Energy Star. They also look at what have the applicants done around energy and water. So all that work, if you're going for the Tobies, works for us too. You can recycle it. So what do you get if you win? Actually, all of the finalists receive case studies, and we'll work with you to craft those. We use the language that that is submitted for us to help consider the projects for the awards to populate it, so save some work there. We produce nice videos, which are linked on our website if you want to see examples of those from last year's winners. We pump it out through our networks. I'm very proud of the collaboration aspect to this. It wouldn't work without all of our collaborating organizations who also will promote your projects through their networks. We do paid advertising as well, so you're getting a lot of exposure, and that paid advertising is done for finalists, not just for the winners, though winners do get some extra, of course, as well as the videos. And a couple of application tips that are also important is, tell the whole story, as I mentioned. We are looking at savings since taking ownership or management, so want to make sure that is clear. I should say there are also, of course, trophies. I think we had some images of those earlier in the slides. And do start early. If you have any questions, contact us. I hope, again, that the examples I provided were helpful. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to talk to you about what categories could make most sense, what type of documentation we can accept. We want to make this as easy a process, but also rigorous and fair as we can. So we put in a lot of work to make this easy for you. So to recap, the criteria: measurable unit and percentage. So it's not just the biggest wins, and it's not just those who make the biggest gains year over year that win. All of it's taken into account and put in context of the organization's commitment and how is that demonstrated over time. We've got a small number of categories, so we'll see diversity in terms of the types of properties and projects within each category. That's what makes this fun. That's what makes this unique, and that's what makes it interesting. Portfolio, energy, water, and then public buildings. Innovator of the Year is for an outstanding individual. Eligibility, existing buildings in LA and LADWP, you got to have done something in 19 that showed savings, but that doesn't have to be a huge capital project. It can be operational types of improvements, tenant engagement that has achieved some results. And I've seen some interesting nominations come in already where that was really the innovative factor, really the big story of 19. Submitting a project is very easy. You've probably seen some emails from us about this already. You will see more, and in the follow-up we'll have a link, but it is very quick, very easy. Anyone can do it, and we shoulder the heavy lifting to get through all that information and help connect all the dots by December 31st. So with that, I would encourage everybody to submit their project today. There's the link. We will be sending that around in email as well. And as I said, we're available to answer any questions that you might have. Our upcoming webinar is actually coming up fairly soon, October 3rd. Resilience is a bigger and bigger conversation. I just received word from our guest speaker right before this that we may need to move that date. So please stay tuned for that. But it's going to be a great conversation with Dan Winters, who's the head of North Americas for GRESB, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. They've developed a new benchmark around resiliency that's really been pushed for by investors, by pension funds, REITs, who are looking at climate risk as a huge factor in what's this building worth. So please stay tuned for an update on that one. In November, we're excited to partner with BOMA, highlight some great water case studies from the W2 challenge, which is waste and water. Of course, we're focused more so on water for our purposes, so it's November 13th. And then getting to next year, so after our submittal deadline, continuing on this theme of resilience. And climate change is the context for a lot of these conversations. Decarbonizing the grid, resiliency of the grid, the role of efficiency in getting us there. And as the most cost-effective first resource, David Jaco, Director of Efficiency Solutions, will be speaking to that point and working on some other exciting guest speakers as well. So logistical note, April 1, 2020 at the California Endowment is the date where we will reveal the winners. Would encourage folks to attend. We have limited open seating. It's mostly for the finalists and winners, but it's a fun day. And we hope to see some new faces and make this the biggest, best one ever. It keeps growing each year, and I'm excited to see what comes in. With us, we are tweeting, we are on LinkedIn, Facebooking, on the interwebs. Email us, reach out to me. Excited to see what comes in this year, and we'll give everyone 20 minutes back to your busy day. Thank you all.